"You're lying, Jasmine." The words hit like a gunshot across the chamber. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The shuffle of papers, the clicking of pens, the murmurs in the back row. Cameras swiveled in perfect synchronization toward her. Every lens, every microphone, every pair of eyes locked on the woman sitting calmly beneath the storm. The echo of his accusation lingered in the vaulted air. Trump leaned back in his chair, lips curled in that familiar smirk of confidence, the kind that says, "I've already won this room." His allies chuckled, some shaking their heads as if to say, "How dare she even try?" But Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. Her gaze didn't waver. There was something unnervingly still about her, the kind of stillness that comes not from fear but from certainty. The kind that unsettles men who mistake silence for surrender. Reporters in the press gallery glanced at one another, already drafting their headlines. Phones lit up with live tweets. "Trump confronts Crockett." "Explosive clash in Congress." The feed was buzzing before she even opened her mouth. And yet, she didn't rush to speak. Instead, she drew a slow breath, letting the weight of the moment hang there, letting him feel it, letting everyone feel it. The narrator's voice cuts in, calm but charged. In American politics, noise is power. But every once in a while, silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. Trump shifted. That brief flicker, just a second of impatience, betrayed him. The man who had built his empire on dominating the narrative suddenly wasn't sure if he still owned it. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Jasmine's hands moved, measured, deliberate, as she reached for the binder resting beside her. The faint scrape of its cover echoed like thunder. Someone whispered, "Oh, she's got something." And in that instant, the tension turned electric. Viewers across the country leaned closer to their screens. Even those who doubted her could feel it. Something was coming, because what Jasmine revealed next didn't just defend her, it shattered the entire accusation. Washington had been running on fumes for weeks. Hearings stacked upon hearings. Scandals bleeding into headlines faster than they could be denied. The air inside Congress felt less like governance and more like a televised arena. Every speech was a performance, every glance a chess move, every word crafted to trend. The committee room that day was no different. Trump's return to the Hill had been marketed like a spectacle. His loyalists filled the front rows, grinning as if the verdict was already written. Cameras lined the walls, hungry for that viral moment. The narrative had been primed. Trump versus the rising Democrat from Texas. Experience versus audacity. In the halls beforehand, whispers traveled like static. "He's going to embarrass her," one staffer said. "She won't last 5 minutes," another smirked. The MAGA camp wanted blood, not legislation, not policy, just the theater of dominance. And in their eyes, Jasmine Crockett was supposed to be the supporting character, not the scene stealer. But she didn't play the part they wrote for her. When she entered the chamber, she carried herself with the composure of someone who'd already weathered worse storms. No entourage, no theatrics, just the quiet confidence of a woman who understood the assignment. Defend the truth, no matter who's shouting. She smiled politely at her colleagues, adjusted her papers, and took her seat. Trump, meanwhile, relished the tension. He had been pacing the perimeter of attention for days, waiting for this exchange. To him, confrontation was oxygen, and this was his favorite stage. His aides had already teased the clash to friendly networks. Watch what happens when Jasmine Crockett tries to spin. They wanted a clip, a headline, a soundbite of him calling out the lies. But politics, as always, loves irony, because while Trump's camp prepared a takedown, Jasmine was preparing a revelation. As the hearing began, questions spiraled into accusations, accusations into spectacle. Trump interrupted. His allies cheered. The cameras panned back and forth, framing him as the aggressor, the fighter, the man unafraid to speak truth to liberals. But what none of them saw, or perhaps refused to see, was that every interruption only sharpened her resolve. Beneath that calm exterior, she was counting. Every distortion, every deflection, every insult was fuel. Her binder, now resting quietly on the table, wasn't just paperwork. It was a trap. pages of verified records, quotes, receipts, an arsenal of precision waiting for the right moment to strike. The narrator's voice breaks through softly. In a country addicted to outrage, preparation doesn't trend until it explodes. The tension thickened. A few onlookers began to notice the contrast. Trump's volume rose with every sentence. Jasmine's tone stayed steady, measured, surgical. One side was theater. The other was truth waiting its turn. Outside the chamber, social media boiled. Hashtags formed mid-hearing. Crockett vs. Trump. Congress showdown. Comment sections became war zones of loyalty and disbelief. News outlets queued up live reactions. The nation, polarized as ever, held its collective breath, not realizing history was about to pivot in a single exchange. And through it all, Jasmine sat with that same half-smile, unshaken, unbothered, and, to the untrained eye, quiet. But behind that calm smile she had come prepared. And the truth waiting in that binder was heavier than anyone expected, because when she began to speak, even her critics leaned in. Long before the accusation echoed through Congress, Donald Trump had already written the playbook for dominance. It wasn't about truth, it was about control. From the boardroom to the campaign trail, from reality TV sets to rallies packed with adoring fans, he mastered the art of bending reality until it bent back toward him. The louder he spoke, the truer it seemed. To Trump, politics was theater, and he was both the director and the star. Every insult was a punchline, every confrontation a scene. Facts were props. Applause was the measure of success. Never admit, always attack, and that was the doctrine. The narrator's voice cuts in, cool and reflective. To Trump, truth is negotiable, as long as he's the loudest in the room. He learned early that silence made him vulnerable, that hesitation invited doubt. So he never paused. In interviews, he'd talk over reporters. In debates, he'd drown out opponents. When confronted with contradictions, he'd pivot, accuse, deflect, or insult. Anything but concede, the crowd rewarded it. In a nation weary of nuance, his simplicity was intoxicating. There's a rhythm to his deflections, familiar to anyone who's seen him under pressure. Corner him with evidence and he'll counter with mockery. Show him proof and he'll question the source. Press him too hard and he'll change the subject entirely. It's not ignorance. It's instinct. Flashback. A hearing from years before. A senator cites data disproving one of his claims. Trump interrupts with a smirk. Fake numbers, fake news. You people never learn. Laughter fills the room. He leaves without answering a single question. But the clip trends for days. Flashback again. A journalist shows him a signed statement contradicting his words. He waves it away. I don't remember signing that. The audience laughs again. He's not winning arguments. He's rewriting the rules of argument itself. That's the trick. Dominance through performance. And for years it worked. His rallies grew. His sound bites defined the news cycle. His controversies only deepened loyalty. People didn't follow him for policy. They followed him for energy, for rebellion, for the way he made them feel untouchable by fact. The truth was background noise in a show that ran on spectacle. But beneath that confidence was something else, a dependence on control. Every confrontation had to end on his terms. Every challenge had to be flipped into a victory. That's why moments like this one, sitting in front of a woman he'd dismissed as irrelevant, rattled him more than he'd admit. Jasmine Crockett was supposed to be another notch in the show. A political newcomer outmatched, outshouted, and overshadowed. His team framed the hearing as a lesson in leadership. Networks loyal to him teased segments like movie trailers. Trump takes on radical Democrats. They expected another easy clip of dominance, but dominance has a weakness. It depends on predictability. The show only works when everyone else follows the script. When critics shout back, when opponents flinch, when the spotlight stays his. That day, Jasmine didn't play along. She didn't interrupt. She didn't shout. She let him build his case louder and louder until the noise became hollow. And for the first time in a long time, Trump's rhythm faltered. His smirk lingered too long. His hand gripped the table tighter. He could sense it. Something was off. The narration deepens. For a man who thrives on chaos, control is the oxygen. Take it away, and you start to see the panic beneath the performance. Those who'd followed him for years recognized the shift. It was subtle but unmistakable. A glance that darted, a tone that cracked. His words, once smooth and commanding, began tripping over themselves. The audience couldn't name it yet, but the dynamic had flipped, because the thing about living by dominance is that it leaves no room for humility. When you build your empire on being untouchable, the smallest truth can bring it crashing down, and that truth was sitting right across from him, hands resting lightly on a binder that could undo everything he'd just said. For years, Trump had used accusation as armor, striking first, shouting hardest, never looking back. It made him seem invincible. But today, the performance met its limit. The cameras were still rolling. The lights still favored him. But something deeper had shifted. The room no longer belonged to the man who shouted the loudest. It belonged to the woman who hadn't yet said a word. The narrator pauses, almost whispering. He had faced opponents, critics, and entire institutions, but never someone who turned his own weapon, noise, into silence. The silence was spreading now. And for a man who built his empire on volume, that was the one thing he couldn't control. But on this day, loud wouldn't be enough. Long before she ever set foot in Congress, Jasmine Crockett learned the rhythm of being underestimated. It started in the courtrooms of Texas, small rooms filled with too many men who thought her voice was too sharp, her hair too bold, her confidence too loud. They mistook her style for attitude, her assertiveness for arrogance. But what they never understood was that she had already learned to turn dismissal into discipline. She wasn't born into privilege or legacy. She built her way up case by case, argument by argument, with nothing but preparation as her weapon. In Dallas, she represented clients who couldn't afford lawyers, the kind of people America forgets until it needs their votes. When others treated them like statistics, Jasmine treated them like stories. Every file on her desk wasn't paperwork. It was a person trying to be heard, and every time she stood in front of a judge, she carried that weight like armor. The narrator's voice softens. Before Congress ever saw her, the world tested her. In those early days, the odds were steep. She faced condescension wrapped in compliments. "You're so articulate. You're brave to take this on. Maybe tone it down a little next time." But Jasmine didn't tone it down. She learned to balance grace with grit, to deliver precision without apology. It was in those years she developed her greatest strength, calm under fire. She studied her opponents not for their arguments, but for their tells. The twitch before a lie, the glance before a dodge, the hesitation before surrender. While they performed, she prepared. Then came the protests. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the long summer where America burned and demanded better. Jasmine wasn't tweeting from the sidelines. She was on the streets, bullhorn in hand, law degree in heart, marching beside the people she defended in court. Cameras caught her face among the crowds, not shouting for chaos, but calling for justice. She became the voice that echoed through city halls, a new kind of politician. Not because she sought power, but because she got tired of pleading with those who already had it. Her activism turned into candidacy, her candidacy into victory. And when she walked into Congress, she carried not just ambition, but the weight of every underestimated woman who came before her. Inside the Capitol, she brought that same courtroom discipline. While others sought spotlight, she sought receipts. She read the reports line by line, memorized testimony, annotated evidence. She didn't trade in sound bites. She traded in substance. And soon, colleagues began to notice the way she dissected arguments with surgical calm, the way she made witnesses stumble not through aggression, but precision. But for every nod of respect came a shadow of doubt. Her rise was too fast, her voice too confident, her skin too brown for some to believe she'd earned her seat. They called her emotional, combative, theatrical, the usual script reserved for women who refused to shrink. And yet, every insult, every snide remark, every eye roll across the chamber became fuel. Every insult she'd ever swallowed became armor. She learned that sometimes the most radical thing a black Woman in Congress can do is simply refuse to be rattled. So she didn't shout back. She didn't rush to prove herself. She just worked, relentlessly, methodically, until her preparation became its own defense. Her staff used to joke that she didn't sleep. She strategized. Late nights under fluorescent lights, papers spread across her desk like battle plans. When others rehearsed outrage, she rehearsed precision. The binder she carried everywhere, thick, worn at the corners, marked with color-coded tabs, was more than a collection of documents. It was a map of accountability, a ledger of facts, her quiet rebellion against chaos. When she walked into that hearing, she knew exactly what was waiting for her. She'd heard the whispers. Trump's going to put her in her place. She'd seen the smirks, the predictions, the pre-written headlines. But what they didn't see, what they could never see, was how long she'd been preparing for this moment. To her, this wasn't just politics. It was the continuation of every courtroom she'd stood in, every protest she'd marched through, every insult she'd endured. It wasn't about personal pride. It was about showing what preparation looks like when the world expects performance. The camera in our mind's eye lingers on her that morning, sitting in her office before the hearing, binder open, highlighter in hand, lips moving silently as she rehearsed her citations. No entourage, no cameras, no flair, just focus. A soft hum of determination in the quiet. The voiceover returns, gentle but steady. Some people chase headlines. Others prepare for history. By the time she entered the chamber, she wasn't nervous. She was ready. The same calm that carried her through Texas courtrooms now steadied her in the halls of power. The same poise that silenced hecklers in debates now met the glare of cameras and critics. When Trump hurled his accusation, "You're lying, Jasmine!" It wasn't the first time someone had tried to discredit her truth. It was simply the loudest. But Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't fire back. Because for her, the real answer was already in her hands. And when the accusation hit, she didn't flinch. She flipped open a binder. The room was already tense. But after Trump's accusation, it turned into a stage. The walls of Congress had witnessed decades of power plays, but this felt different, personal, electric, raw. Trump leaned forward, his voice booming across the microphones. "You've been twisting the numbers, misrepresenting what I said. You're lying, Jasmine. Everybody knows it." His hand sliced the air for emphasis, that familiar performance sharpened to a blade. Across from him, Jasmine didn't move. Her face was calm, her eyes steady. The faintest glint of defiance caught the light. "I understand that's your opinion, Mr. Trump," she said evenly, her tone more judicial than political. "But opinions don't replace evidence," the room murmured. The line wasn't loud, but it landed. Reporters scribbled. Staffers glanced at one another. Someone near the back whispered, "She's not taking the bait." Trump smiled, that tight, rehearsed grin that telegraphed confidence but revealed irritation. "You can say that, but facts don't care about volume," Jasmine continued, her words crisp, deliberate, cutting through the air like the click of a gavel. He laughed, forcing casualness. "Volume's not the issue here, sweetheart. Honesty is." There it was, the smirk, the condescension, the gendered sting that hung between them like static. For a moment, the oxygen in the chamber seemed to thin. Cameras zoomed in. Every news feed caught it. Jasmine's lips curved just slightly. Not a smile, but the prelude to one. She straightened in her chair, shoulders square, voice low but commanding. "You just made a claim," she said. "And in this building, claims require proof." Her tone wasn't angry. It was surgical. Each syllable landed like a scalpel. Trump leaned back, trying to turn the energy back in his favor. "Everybody's seen it," he said, waving vaguely toward the cameras. "It's all on video, it's out there. Anyone with half a brain knows. But we're not here to debate rumors," she replied. "We're here to examine facts. So let's." The murmurs grew louder now. The balance of control had shifted by inches, but the room could feel it. Even his allies began to watch her more carefully. Theatrics met precision, and for once, theatrics blinked first. Trump's voice rose, desperate to reclaim dominance. You Democrats love to act innocent while covering your tracks. Don't act like you're fooling anyone. The narrator's tone slides in softly. He spoke louder. She spoke sharper. He built chaos. She built clarity. She waited for him to finish, giving him the rope he didn't realize he was handing her. Then she leaned forward, resting her hands on the table. Mr. Trump, she said quietly, you've made a lot of statements today. Would you like to stand by all of them, on record? He blinked, caught between pride and caution. Of course I stand by them. Why wouldn't I? Good, she said, that small smile finally breaking through. Then let's look at them together. Her hand moved toward the binder. The simple motion sent a ripple through the room. Journalists leaned forward. Phones rose higher. Trump's expression shifted just slightly, from confidence to curiosity to something closer to concern. Jasmine didn't rush. She opened the binder like someone unveiling evidence in a trial, which, in a sense, she was. Every sound in the chamber seemed amplified now. The soft creak of paper, the hum of air vents, the mechanical clicks of camera shutters. Trump tried to speak again, filling the silence. You know, I've dealt with a lot of people like you. She didn't look up. People like me? That stopped him for half a breath. I mean, lawyers, politicians, whatever, he stammered. People who twist things. Her gaze finally met his. Then this should be very familiar. The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the gallery stopped breathing. The narrator murmurs, in the theater of power, there's nothing louder than composure. She turned a page. A chart gleamed beneath the overhead lights. Since you mentioned honesty, she said, let's begin with your numbers. For a moment, the chamber held its breath. The binder, thick, tabbed, color-coded, sat between them like a weapon disguised as paperwork. Jasmine's fingers rested lightly on the cover, the fluorescent lights glinting off its laminated edge. The silence stretched. Even Trump hesitated. His instinct was to fill the air, to talk over, to control the tempo. But something in her stillness disarmed that impulse. Then, slowly, Jasmine opened the binder. The first sound was a faint click of the rings unlocking. Paper slid against paper. The cameras zoomed in, red lights blinking, lenses tightening focus. Reporters leaned forward so far their chairs creaked. Let's start with your statement from June 12th, she said evenly. You said that federal funds were diverted illegally. Quote, hundreds of millions missing. Nobody knows where it went. Her hand turned the page. Here's the record. Treasury report, June 11th, every dollar accounted for. And right here, she tapped a line highlighted in blue, is your own signature on the disbursement approval. Trump blinked. I don't recall signing that. It's dated and notarized, she said, not looking up. You did. A soft murmur rippled across the room. Chairs shifted. Someone coughed. The usual partisan applause or heckling didn't come. Everyone knew this wasn't politics anymore. It was exposure. Trump leaned back, his voice lowering. You can't just cherry-pick documents. You know how these bureaucrats operate. Cherry-picking implies omission, Jasmine replied. But omission requires silence. And I brought the entire record. She turned another page, thicker, heavier, stapled packets, each labeled meticulously. The microphones caught the crisp sound of shuffling paper, a sound oddly triumphant. For once, the narrator intoned softly, even the grandstanding stopped. She continued. This is your public statement from July. You claimed the report was hidden and classified. It wasn't. It was published online. The same day. A screen flickered. On behind her, a projection of the government website, a timestamp, a public link. Her team had cued everything. The contrast was brutal. Facts versus theater, light versus noise. Trump opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, there was no applause, no echo of laughter from allies, just the mechanical hum of cameras feeding the moment live to millions. Jasmine flipped another tab. And then there's the donation list you mentioned, the one you said proved corruption. Here are the receipts. She slid the copies forward, neat and deliberate. The donors you named? Not only are they legitimate, but half of them also contributed to your own campaign. That line hit like thunder. A collective exhale swept the room. The narrator's voice deepened. For years, he'd mastered distraction, turning every question into a spectacle. But here, distraction had nowhere to hide. Trump tried to laugh. You think paperwork changes anything? The people know what's really going on. She looked at him, the way an attorney looks at a witness who's just sealed his own fate. Paperwork is what changes things, Mr. Trump, because paperwork doesn't forget. The murmurs swelled again, this time from both sides of the aisle. A senator from the back muttered something about finally seeing the receipts. On social media, hashtags were already forming. Binder of receipts, Crockett vs. Trump, facts over fury clips started circulating. One slow-motion shot of her sliding the document forward, another of his tightening jaw. Commentators were narrating live. Congress hasn't been this quiet in years. The camera cut back to Jasmine. Her voice was calm, not triumphant. I came here to discuss accountability. You came here to call me a liar. So let's finish that discussion properly. She pointed to the binder. Each tab represents a claim you made. Each section contains the proof refuting it. Every line sourced. Every date verified. The narrator broke in. She didn't shout. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The truth had volume of its own. Trump leaned forward again, his tone more defensive now. You think people care about technicalities? About bureaucratic nonsense? They care about leadership. Jasmine didn't flinch. Leadership begins with honesty. The pause that followed wasn't silence. It was awe. The kind of silence that happens when people realize they're watching something historic. In the gallery, a reporter mouthed, "She's ending him." Another whispered, "This is going viral within minutes." But Jasmine's face stayed composed. She wasn't performing, she was presenting. Every gesture was precise, every citation exact. Years of legal discipline distilled into one devastating demonstration. Trump's hands drummed against the table. He shifted in his seat, searching for an escape line, a pivot, anything. You know, these agencies, they manipulate information all the time. You can't just trust— She cut him off, her tone still soft. So you're saying the record you signed, the data your team released, and the figures your own accountants filed are all lies? He hesitated. That's not what I said. Then what did you say? The narrator whispered, and there it was, the corner he could not talk his way out of. She leaned back slightly, binder still open. The spotlight, metaphorical and literal, wasn't on Trump anymore. It was on the paper, on the truth. On her, from the gallery, someone began to clap, softly, awkwardly, then stopped. It wasn't the time for applause. It was the time for reckoning. Trump's usual defenders stayed uncharacteristically quiet. Even the ones trained to interject, to derail, to deflect, stayed still. Jasmine turned one last page, her fingers steady. For the record, she said, these documents were submitted to the committee in advance. They've been verified by 3 separate agencies. So if you'd like to contest them, I'd suggest you do so under oath. A shiver moved through the chamber. Trump didn't answer. He sat back, eyes darting toward his counsel, lips pressed into a thin, silent line. The narrator murmured, "Power doesn't vanish in a flash. It shrinks quietly in the shadow of accountability." Then Jasmine closed the binder. The sound, that single, final click, echoed louder than any gavel. She looked across the room, scanning the faces of colleagues, opponents, cameras, history itself. "That's not opinion," she said, her voice steady, resonant, final. She rose from her seat. "That's evidence." And in that moment, Congress, America, and the internet all froze. It started within seconds, the clip spreading like wildfire. The words, "That's not opinion, that's evidence," echoed across every platform, clipped, remixed, subtitled, reshared by millions. Before Jasmine had even left the chamber, her name was trending in all caps. Crockett vs. Trump, binder of receipts, truthonrecord.twitter became a digital coliseum. One user wrote, "I just witnessed a masterclass in composure." Jasmine Crockett didn't argue. she annihilated with facts. Another posted a still frame of her closing the binder. The moment power met preparation. Even neutral journalists, usually allergic to adjectives, couldn't help themselves. Headlines poured in like Judgment Day editorials. Crockett's calm destroys chaos. Congress goes silent after Trump's challenge backfires. A new face of accountability in Washington. And yet, as the applause roared online, the backlash flared just as fiercely. On conservative feeds, influencers tried to reclaim the narrative. Elitist lawyer grandstands with government papers nobody reads. Cable panels erupted overnight, pundits shouting over split screens, one side insisting she humiliated the former president, the other calling it an ambush of bureaucracy. But the contrast only made the clip grow stronger. Because no matter how it was spun, the footage spoke for itself. Raw, uncut, undeniable. You could see the proof. You could see his silence. You could feel the shift. Late-night hosts turned it into a cultural moment. One joked, Trump called her a liar, and she responded like an IRS audit with a PhD. The crowd roared. Another said, she didn't just bring receipts. She brought the entire accounting department. The laughter echoed through living rooms across America. But beneath the humor was something deeper, a collective exhale. People who'd spent years watching chaos masquerade as confidence finally saw calm dismantle bluster. Dignity had gone viral. The narrator's tone deepened. The truth had gone viral, not because it was loud, but because it was undeniable. In Houston, an older woman posted a video, eyes bright with pride. That's our Congresswoman. That's how you handle bullies, with evidence and grace. In Chicago, a group of students played the clip on loop in a political science class. In D.C., aides whispered that this was the first time in months the committee room had felt like a courtroom, not a circus. And in Mar-a-Lago, according to one reporter, Trump was furious. He'd expected outrage, confrontation, noise, something to fight against. But there was nothing to swing at. No insult could outshout paper facts. No tweet could erase the timestamp on the screen behind her. The White House press room buzzed with questions. Does this mark a turning point? Has public patience with spectacle finally cracked? Even allies of the former president sidestepped interviews, muttering about context and optics. Meanwhile, Jasmine stayed quiet. No gloating posts, no victory tour. Just one brief message pinned to her account. When they call you a liar, bring the truth, and bring it organized. That line became its own movement. Shirts printed overnight, hashtags fused into slogans. Even late-night radio hosts quoted her before commercial breaks. It wasn't just a viral moment. In the days that followed, the noise subsided. The hashtags quieted. The talk shows moved on, but something about that moment refused to fade. It lingered, not as outrage, not as spectacle, but as stillness. The kind that doesn't demand attention, yet commands it, because what the country had witnessed wasn't just a political clash. It was a moral mirror, a reminder that in a world obsessed with volume, truth often speaks in whispers. The narrator's voice softened. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the sound of truth landing. The image of Jasmine sitting calmly before that binder became more than a viral frame. It became an emblem, a new kind of strength. The strength of restraint, the strength of a person who knows that evidence doesn't need applause to be powerful. For so long, America had been trained to equate dominance with truth. The one who shouted hardest, interrupted fastest, insulted best. But on that day, composure rewrote the script. Jasmine didn't win because she outperformed him. She won because she didn't play his game. Where others swung at insults, she built a foundation. Where arrogance reached for spectacle, she reached for documentation. And that difference, that quiet defiance, is what turned a hearing into history. The narrator continued, almost like a prayer. Integrity isn't loud. It's consistent. It's the steady voice that doesn't flinch when confronted by chaos. In classrooms, teachers replayed the moment not as politics, but as principle. This, one said, is how you argue without losing yourself. In homes, parents pointed to her and said to their children, "This is what standing your ground looks like. Calm, prepared, unstoppable." Even some who disagreed with her politics admitted the power of her poise. "She didn't just counter him," one columnist wrote. "She restored a little faith in what truth used to feel like." And that, more than the binder, more than the receipts, was the lesson that outlived the confrontation. This wasn't about one woman winning an argument, the narrator intoned. It was about showing a nation how to stand firm with facts. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't humiliation. It was reclamation of truth, of dignity, of what leadership can mean when grounded in evidence instead of ego. The world didn't need another shouting match. It needed a demonstration, a visual reminder that patience isn't passivity, that grace can dismantle arrogance more completely than anger ever could. And as the chamber faded from headlines, one image stayed, Jasmine closing the binder. A small motion, but heavy with meaning. The sound of truth closing its case, not with fury, but with finality. The narrator's tone deepened once more. Because in a country where noise has become currency, silence, the kind backed by proof, is the rarest form of power. Her moment became legend not because it was dramatic, but because it was undeniable. It invited reflection, not reaction. It didn't beg for attention. It earned respect. And for those watching, the immigrants, the daughters, the workers, the quiet believers in fairness, it was a kind of vindication. Proof that calm could still conquer chaos. That evidence could still pierce through performance. As the camera would fade on her steady face, the final line would hover like an echo. Half whispered, half felt. Sometimes, the loudest sound in a divided nation is the quiet certainty of truth. Soft music swells, not triumphant, but resolute. A tone that says the fight isn't over, but the path is clear, and as the screen fades to black, one truth remains suspended in that silence, that history doesn't always belong to those who shout the loudest. Sometimes it belongs to the one who stays calm and brings the receipts. Trump called her a liar, and for a heartbeat the room froze until the evidence spoke louder than anyone ever could. What followed wasn't chaos or shouting or spectacle. It was silence, the kind that only truth can create. History will remember that silence, the way it settled over Congress like a verdict, like a breath finally released after years of noise. Because moments like this aren't just political, they're moral. They remind us that character still matters, that preparation still wins. That truth, no matter how buried, will always find its way to the surface. When Jasmine Crockett opened that binder, she didn't just defend herself. She defended the idea that facts still belong in the conversation. That leadership isn't about domination, it's about discipline. That composure, not chaos, is what makes a nation strong. The narrator's voice steadies, rich with purpose. When truth stands tall, even noise has to listen. If you believe evidence still matters, share this story. Let it travel. Let it echo through every feed, every screen, every conversation where decency feels outnumbered. Because silence doesn't mean surrender. It means victory. And as the music swells, the camera pans back to that hearing room, the empty chairs, the still microphones, the binder closed neatly on the desk. Because sometimes, the narrator whispers, the quietest moment in Congress says the loudest thing about America. Fade to black.